also in Syria. 7.8 magnitude quake hit early this morning, toppling buildings and triggering a search for survivors. In some areas, whole neighbourhoods are reported to have collapsed. Turkey has declared a state of emergency and requested international help. Hundreds of buildings have been destroyed by the earthquake, and rescue workers are searching through piles of collapsed concrete and twisted metal. Let's get the latest from Ali, who's standing by for us in the region. Good morning to you, Alistair. What's the latest where you are?
Good morning, Kay. Well, we've been on air for about 2 hours reporting the latest developments, and in that short time, the death toll has risen threefold, and I think there is no doubt it will climb dramatically. The pictures coming out of southern Turkey and northwest Syria are devastating. The rush is now on to try and see if they can recover any victims who have been buried under the rubble, but it will need a huge international effort. Here's my report on the latest as first light has dawned over the region.
The earthquake struck a few hours before dawn, as most people are still asleep in bed. As first light broke across southern Turkey, the sheer scale of the damage became evident. The death toll started to rise rapidly, and the coming hours will be an urgent rush to find survivors under the rubble. The earthquake was powerful and shallow, only 6 miles beneath the surface, and it was felt around the Middle East. Some of the worst reports of devastation are coming out of northwest Syria, where many of the buildings are already damaged from 12 years of civil war, and there are hundreds of thousands of refugees. Turkey has declared a state of emergency and already requested international support. Aid will start arriving from around the world, but getting into rebel-held parts of Syria will be a challenge in itself. Major aftershocks have followed the initial earthquake, including one recorded at 6.7 on the Richter scale. The next few hours are certain to reveal more tragedy as the rescue effort gets underway. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News.
So as you can see from the pictures there, and they're emerging sort of every few minutes out of southern Turkey and northwest Syria, the devastation looks extreme and it looks widespread. The rescuers, and Turkey has a history of earthquakes, so there will be a degree of expertise already on the ground in Turkey. They have to go gently. They will have to make sure that they don't displace any major blocks of concrete from the collapsed buildings, and they will do everything they can do to try and find anyone who is trapped under the rubble. Because, as I said in my report, it happened just before dawn. Many people will have been asleep in their beds, and I'm afraid that probably will add to the death toll. Coupled with that, you've got very bad weather, particularly in northwest Syria. It's cold, rain, reports of snow as well. That is not going to help matters. And then, it's the issue of simply trying to get aid into these places. Turkey will have its own diplomatic problems or issues when trying to accept international aid, although I'm sure they will do. Northwest Syria is altogether more difficult because of the situation there. It is contested territory, has been for more than a decade. It's war ravaged. Many of the buildings already in a very, very poor condition, and you've got hundreds of thousands of refugees. There is an aid hub in Dubai, which is obviously not far away in the region, warehouses stuffed full of humanitarian aid, things like medicine, food, shelters, and specialist equipment that will be ready to go, but they will need to try and negotiate access in there, and they will need to do it as a matter of urgency, because in situations like this, it is no exaggeration to say that every minute counts, and particularly the first few hours after an earthquake like this, they try and find anybody who is still alive buried under the rubble.
Yeah, 360 is the latest death toll that we are hearing, isn't it? But we're also hearing that the United States is immediately stepping up and offering aid to the country. That takes time to get there, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does take time, although a lot of these organisations and charities who have the expertise to deal with earthquakes or other humanitarian disasters are on a very short notice to move anyway, and will try and move in there and offer their help as quick as possible. It's not easy to reach that part of the world, even at the best of times. But as I said, there is that aid hub in Dubai that is strategically placed in that sort of crossroads of the Middle East, crossroads of the world, really, with their airport connections. And if they can bring that into play, then that will help a great deal. Turkey, of course, is a NATO ally, a member of NATO. So there will be connections that they might be able to draw on there when dealing with some of their allies. But northeast Syria is a whole different ballgame, and trying to get people into that country and to be able to work there in safety will not be straightforward. The White Helmets, the Civil Defence and Rescue Force that operates in northwest Syria, is already very skilled, unfortunately, over years having to deal with things like airstrikes and artillery strikes, buildings. So they are on the ground, but they will need as much help as they can get.
Yeah, just looking at Twitter, just seeing President Zelensky has just been tweeting, "I extend my condolences to the President Erdogan, the people of Turkey and the families of those who lost their lives in the earthquake, and wish a speedy recovery to all the injured. We stand with the people in this difficult time. We are ready to provide the necessary assistance to overcome the consequences of this disaster." That's the latest that we're hearing from President Zelensky, and I'm sure other leaders, other world leaders, will begin to rally around very quickly, Alistair.
For sure. As people start to wake up across Europe and then into North America, the help will start coming in, or at least offers of help will start coming in. You can't fail to be shocked by the pictures that you're seeing. And I'm sure that Turkey's allies will want to do everything they possibly can do to offer any support that might be needed for that. Turkey, as I was saying, has, because of where it sits, fault lines, has a history of earthquakes, and it's not a good thing always to compare one to the other, but the last earthquake they had, major earthquake they had, was in 1999, when 17,000 people lost their lives. The death toll in this is nowhere near that yet, but it is climbing rapidly, and I'm sure it will raise questions within Turkey again in the aftermath of this, building standards, housing standards, and whether or not a lot of the infrastructure, particularly in southern Turkey, which is a slightly poorer area of the country, whether or not they are built to sufficient standard to withstand earthquakes, given the history and the vulnerability Turkey has to suffering natural disasters like this.